Welcome to the Railway Laser Lines How to Build series, and this video will show you how to make the O gauge inspection pit. This is a rather large one. Gone to town on this one. This is going to be part of a new kit that's coming out in 2022. So I'll just run through the parts that will come with this kit. There are a couple of bits missing, but I'll explain that in a moment. So we have the following. So we have the main bottom floor pit of the inspection pit, and as you can see there are 3 holes. Now these are drain covers. I haven't made the drain covers yet, so these 3 items will be included in a kit, but I don't have them to hand at the moment. You then have the main frame sides to the inspection pit, and then the following parts there will be 2 of. So these are the side protection plates for the rails for the new push to fit system that we're using. So this is the Magic, this is our model board. So there are 2 here, but you need 2 for each side, so you'll get 4. You then got a spacer plate. This will be the plate that goes between this one and the outer section to give you room for the noggins to go through your base plate. So this plate will have 2 of those. You then have your outer plate, which has your noggins to go into your base frame of your inspection pit or floor, whichever you're going to use. In this case, this will go straight into the new depot build. And then you have your outer 3 pieces, which form part of your LED cover plate, basically, so you can light this pit up, thread your wires through the back plate and have them covered. You've then got your glazing. At the moment they have their covers on. Now you might want to keep these on, or you can peel them and have them as a clear glazing. You've then got your interior, how can I call these? These are a frame holder. So basically these will be going inside the main side. Then you'll have your glazing, and then you'll have your outer frames. So these are your backers. You then have your glazing, and then you'll have your frame glaze to go around the glazing, and then last of all you have your interior pit steps of some similar size and 2 smaller sizes, which represent the top and the bottom. So as you can see, that's even without any rail chairs, and I think there's about 80 rail chairs. As you can see there, I think there's 42 parts here, so plus these 3 is 45, and plus 80 odd for the rail chairs, about 120 odd pieces for this kit. So we haven't decided whether this will become a standalone item or it will just form part of any future kits that we make. So we need to move on to the build and how to progress, so we'll do that next. Having moved all the parts away, the only parts you'll need to start off with are the side inspection pit pieces and the thicker 6-piece framework. Now these are the backing panels to go in for your interior lights. So effectively they're held on the back by some masking tape. I didn't want to add any tags on these because these are very thin, and sanding these down could end up breaking them, so I've just added some tape on the back. Just pull the tape off and effectively it comes out. So that's the part, and that part there is going to be going in each hole, and this thickness of this side piece is 6mm. This is 4mm, so it will leave a 2mm gap at the top, of which we will fill it with a 1mm glazing and a 1mm framing to give it a nice flush finish. So we need to glue inside here, or the best thing to do is most probably glue around the outside of this. Just use some thin glue. Any other deluxe material glues are good. PVA is okay, it will work, just don't put too much in. And I'm just using a spare piece of ply just to make sure I've got a flat surface, and when this is glued, I'm going to stick it inside there, and it'll drop to the bottom, and it'll give us that 2mm gap at the top, and then we can replicate that on the other two, and then we'll also do it on the other side one as well. So we've got 6 to do, so we'll do those. To help the frame stick to the side of the inspection pit wall, what I do when obviously once I've glued round is I put that centre piece in that goes to waste back inside. It then allows the framework to guide around the edge. If you don't use this, you tend to find, because this is only I think a mil thick, tends to protrude away from the side of the walls. So just stick this back in. When it's dried, obviously it'll come back out again because you're only gluing this side and not this side. So we'll repeat this for the other 5 windows and then we'll come back. So the interior plates are all fitted, and all I've done is just run a bit of glue around the outside as well, just to bond them. I have noticed they are slightly thinner than the width, so I most probably will make those adjustment for the kit, but they're only there just to add depth, to give the glazing something to lean on, so they're not exactly going to be holding anything heavy. Those need to dry, and then we'll be adding one of the front plates. Now obviously we have the glazing and we have the front frameworks. Now we're not going to be adding these yet, we need to paint all this at some stage, so put these aside. And your front framing, they need to come out. You then most probably need to add a double-sided masking tape, or put the masking tape double folded so it sticks to something, and then you can paint these. Ideally prime them first and then paint them. Painted is better to the primer, and then once obviously this is all done here, we can then come back and fit these at a later date, but they will need priming and painting. Do not fit them before you paint the side of the pits. Our next job is to get one of the model board card parts, and ideally we want the nice side up. Obviously when we laser cut this, you get some flashbacks from the back, so that can be hidden. Not that it matters because you're going to be painting this anyway, but ideally you want it this way facing up, and we're going to be gluing this to the top of the side inspection pit side. The best option here is to get your base and thread the model board through the holes so it goes right up to the edges. Once you've added all your glue along your side of your panel, is then to fit this inside here as well. Once you've done that, rub your fingers along the inside of here with the card to fit it, and then what I tend to do is I tend to then use wooden pegs just to hold it in place. If you're worried about marking the card, then maybe just put a piece of paper or thin card inside to protect it as well. So I'm going to add this part to the side here. I'm not going to be gluing it, I'm going to be gluing this fascia plate panel here and then moving it up to the model board, and then they'll stick together. So hopefully when I show you next, you'll see what I mean. So I've added some glue all the way down here. All I'm going to do now is thread that onto the side here and then press them against each other and hopefully hold them in place along with some pegs. Just make sure it's all bonded together nicely, and we'll allow that to dry. Right, good little tip here is to use both of the inspection side panels. Now obviously we put the card on one of them, we haven't done it on the other one, but because we've got 12mm of extended base plate, if you stick the other one underneath, it sits up nicely, as you can see. And then all I've done is just rub my hands along, gone and made sure it's all nice and glued together, and then I've got a spare piece of wood, just put some weight on it with my hands and allowed it to dry, and that's that one done. And now we can obviously allow that to dry, give it a good 5 or 10 minutes. We don't, if you notice anything coming away, don't panic at this moment in time, we can always rectify it later. But once that's dry, we can then take this off, take this one away, and then we'll do it to the other one and use this as the backing plate just to make sure that it don't get it dirty. So that's a good little tip to make it life easier to gluing the side panel. This is the model board and it does take to primer and paint really well. So that's that bit done. So we'll come back and do the other side, exactly what we've just done. Okay, so we've done this side, which is the side facing the inner edge of the inspection pit. So before we go to the other side, we need to do the back side of this one with the other part of the model board. Now obviously it doesn't matter which way you put this one on, because there's going to be a plate either side, so the fresh panel or the slightly burnt one doesn't really matter. So all we need to do is to do exactly what we did before, except we turn it over. We're going to add some glue all over here. We can then add this panel on, and we can get it in place by sticking it inside here. So again, add it to this panel, the base first, slot it in, and then offer this up against it. It's easier if you put the glue on here and then try and to get it level, you might be slightly out. So the easy thing to do is to wedge it in the holes, add the glue, fit it in, and then get your spare base, move it over, put it on top, gives you a flush straight edge, and you can fit that one. Sounds all complicated, but as you can see, that one was pretty simple to do. We're just replicating it on the other side. So we'll do that next. And then we have the other side done. So as you can now see, with that one off, it's still there. We now have, let me take that off. So that one we don't need. So now you can see we now have our plates that protect all the grooves. So this is our plates that will help us with our push to fit system. So that's now in place. So this is done. So we can allow that to dry. We can put that to one side. We then need to replicate doing exactly the same on this piece. So we might need that bit again just to put on the back to hold it, but just make sure you don't get any glue everywhere. Just when you put the glue on here, just make sure it doesn't go through all the holes or the grooves, and you're careful with how you do it. So that's I'm going to leave that to dry for another 5 minutes. I'm going to add the glue and do this side. Once that's dry, we'll fold it over and do the other side as well, and we'll come back and show you once that's done. So we've done one side, come back and show you when the second side is done. Also, to help with the process is to add your model board card section onto the base plate before you add your glue to the side panels. It's a long piece, it's over 1/2 meter long, so if you're using, I don't recommend PVA, it's too thick, but so if you use the Deluxe Materials products, they are quite thin and they do go off quite quickly. So by the time you started gluing here and you've got to here, that end's already starting to dry. So if you haven't got this to hand and you fuss around and you can't quite get it on, it takes you a minute or two, this is starting to bond on here without you putting that section on. So put that section on like that, add your glue, and then it's ready to put on and bond together. Hopefully that makes sense. Right, so that's that stage done. We've both done both sides of the inspection pit side with our model board to give us our protection plate for our push to fit rail chairs. So that's now done. Our next job is to fit one of these in place. You don't want to fit two, otherwise we're going to be in trouble because we've got to fit the stairway. So you'll notice that the inner protection plate has no stairwell. The idea next is to glue one side of your inspection pit side to your base. So we can be adding some glue along the edges of here, not on these bits, just on the inner sides here. You can add some glue in the holes at the front. Don't go all the way through, but just at the front if you want to. And we're going to slide that in. Make sure that that goes all the way in, and we're going to hold it there. Again, we could probably use this one as a guide to give us the 12mm. Keep it in position, and that's going to bond to the side. We'll do that, and then we'll come back and tell you what to do next. So that's the first job, is to bond the side plate to the base. As you can see, that's now fitted nicely against the inspection pit side. Now if you get any glue coming out of the sides here, just get a wet brush and damp brush, wipe off the excess and then wipe any glue off. This is obviously model board. It will expand if you get it soaking wet, so you need to make sure if you get any glue on, you just wipe it off with a damp brush and then perhaps go over with your finger just to get any excess glue off as well. Allow that to dry. That's now bonding. Once that's dry, we are then going to add the outer protection plate on top underneath here. I'll show you in a minute. So we're going to allow this to dry and we'll come back and then we'll glue this section plate to the underside of this one. So that's that plate fitted, in position, glued. So that's that job done. So what we now need to do is we now need to fit the other side of the inspection plate and glue it in position. So run your glue along these sections here, fit it in place and then stop. Do not add the back plate to that side because we'll be threading the steps through. The reason we put it on this side is to stop the steps from going through the hole all the way out the other side. So we're going to be gluing here, adding the inspection pit, and then we'll come back. So at this stage your inspection pit should look something like this. So both sides fitted, you've got your model board sides fitted both sides, but on this side we have a section plate, but if we turn over the other side there is no section plate here. We can still see access to the steps. So steps are the next thing we need to do. So you have a little template of some steps, most the same size, two apart from the other side, and obviously you need to duplicate this on the other end. So what we need to do is just take them out. They should literally pop out, but be careful with these two small ones, they don't break, but they're held on by tiny little tags either end. So just take them out, and then what we need to do is then slide them from this side across, going into the back of the bottom one. Sounds complicated, and you need to start off at the bottom and work your way up. Now hopefully these will fit without any sanding, but I can't guarantee that's the case because obviously the thickness of MDF can, especially 1mm, could be 1mm over here, 1.2mm over here. So if you're having trouble fitting them through, which I hope you don't, you might just need to just rub your step alongside a bit of fine sandpaper to thin it out slightly, and then hopefully it will slot in. You don't need to glue them in at this moment in time because obviously they'll just slot in and they'll protrude out, and then when you add the outer section place it should keep your steps in place. So the only time I may glue is when they're all fitted in position, and I'll add some glue behind them. So you need to do this side and then replicate this end with the second template. So that's all the steps removed from its template. You'll see the two smaller ones, one is slightly thinner than the other one. The top one here is the one that slots at the very bottom. So that's the very first piece that we're going to be slotting in, and then we'll use the main steps to fit in horizontal and vertical all the way down till we get to that one, and then we'll fit that one in place. You might just want to glue this top one in place because obviously it's got nothing to protect it at the moment, so it might just be that that's the one you add some glue on, and then once they're in place do some glue from behind. So I'm going to slot those in and we'll see how that looks when it's done. Hopefully, like me, you didn't need to sand any of these steps. They went in rather easily, to be honest, and they pushed in place, and now they're in place. All I'm going to do now is add a bit of glue on these edges and in the corners just to keep them in position, and that will make them solid. And then once you've done the other end and done exactly the same, we can then add this side plate as well to protect that side. So we'll glue those and then we'll come back. So we've added the other end steps, slotted them through. Obviously, as you can see, I haven't put the spacer plate on yet, but also what I've done, I just had a little bit of track left over and I put a few of my rail chairs in, and I've just kept it in here, pushed it in to make sure when this, because I've added some glue underneath the stairs, and obviously I wanted to make sure that they were in the correct position, so I put this tiny piece of track across to keep it in position while it dries. So when I come to put the whole rail down, it should fit nicely. So if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to, because you've got your rail chairs. There might be a few left over, but if not, just pull them off. I'm going to allow that to dry, and then we'll come back and we'll start the next part. Now that the steps have been fitted and glued, and the little piece of track there to keep it in place, we can now glue our section plate to the side of this. This will keep everything in position, and all we need to do again is add some glue to the inner edge, thin glue, and then push it in, and then you're going to need to clamp this one or hold this one together, because we've now used the other side. We can't use that one, so I'm just going to add some glue to the inner side of the section plate, hold it up against the inner inspection pit, hold it in position, and it won't take long to dry, a few minutes, and then we can come back and move on to the next part. This item wasn't shown at the beginning of the video with all the parts list, as I hadn't actually done them. I did mention it, so I have been to the unit again now and have cut these small little drain covers. They will fit inside here. Now I would certainly advise, when you come to build yours, is to fit them before adding any of these side panels on, because then you can get them nice and flush. So I've got to work my magic around these. So they're just held on by a couple of little tags. Just cut them out with a zippy blade knife, and then glue them in place. That's all you need to do with those. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come back and show you. And there we have the drain pipes. Definitely worth recommending doing those at the beginning, when you've got your bottom base free of anything else. It's easier to get to. I just added a bit of card on top, kept them in position while I glued them. So they're all now in place. So they're drying, and obviously when we come to prime it, I'll prime those grey and then go over with a dark grey or black paint, give them the drain effect. So that's done. Next part to do is another part that wasn't included in the parts list, but has subsequently been made, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Now that we've put the section plate on and that's all done, we've as good as done the majority of the inspection pit. We just now need to finish off with another part that wasn't shown at the beginning with the parts list, and this is the, I don't know what they call this, an inner plinth. It's basically a concrete plinth that basically goes between the bottom inspection pit base and the side, and it slots up against the stairs. I notice on the inspection pit that this is based on that they've got one either side, so it comes in a little template. It'll have some masking tape around. I haven't added any noggins, just take them out and you need to glue them in place. I'm going to glue the inner side of this and the underside, and then just fit it up against the side and hold it in position, allow it to dry, and then repeat with the other one, and then that will be done. So I'm going to do those and I'll come back and show you when they're finished. So we've done the inner concrete plinth on both sides. That's now drying. So there's that one and there's the other one. So what we now need to do is to fit the outer plates to each side of the inspection pit. Now these are the parts that will go up into your base of your shed or frame, whatever you're going to use, but this obviously is part of a kit, so this is going to go into the floor base. So I'm going to glue these either side, and then we'll go and also then glue the side parts for the LED lighting and wiring box that will allow you to thread all your wires and light them through should you decide to. You still need to fit these even if you're not going to do any lighting, because these need to go up into your base. So a little bit of glue on each side and then put them up, and they should then fit flush with the edges of the base, and that will then be done. So I'm going to glue those two and I'll come back and show you when that's done. So the outer base plate has been fitted. So all that we now need to do on both sides is to fit the boxing. Now obviously you've got your 3 lights where you can put all your LEDs. So what I would recommend is gluing in the top panels. Let me do this one-handed. Do the top part. If you glue that in position, and then also glue this one in position, and then with the center plate, put that in, but do not glue it in, because obviously we need to add your wiring and your lighting at some stage. But if you add this in while these 2 end pieces of glue are drying, you will be able to then just take this on and off. So there you go, that's fitted in. So I would suggest gluing this part and the top part in place. Leave this off, allow it to dry. Once it's dry, then obviously you can take the middle part off. That then you know is in the correct position. You can then run your wiring from your back into your lighting hole, carry on along here into your next lighting hole, and so on, depending on how you want to light them. Obviously these are I think pump holes from what I've been told, so there's no lighting in those. They were just holes where some water pumping went on, but the pit that I have has 3 of them, so I've added it on. So we're going to add these to both sides, glue them, allow them to dry, fit the center piece in, but do not glue this in, and then we'll come back and show you. The 2 box side panels have dried, and I've also been into the garage and given it a first coat of grey primer. Now I've used some Tamiya masking tape to go all the way along the top of the rails where the chairs are going to push into. I don't want any paint going in there, and I did exactly the same. And then obviously at an angle sprayed. That's the first coat of grey. I have gone in there and slightly sanded it just to take away any roughness, and then I'm going to give it another second coat. Then we'll look into adding some different tones and colours, because obviously this is way too grey for a inspection pit. We need to have some whites, browns, blacks, etc. to make it look a bit grubby before I fit it onto the base. So I have done my first coat of primer. I'm going to go and do a second coat. Obviously I'm trying to keep these noggins clear of any paint, because obviously they've got to go into my base. So far so good. And then obviously once it's all been done, we can then add our glazing and framework, but we're not going to add those just yet. So I'm going to go into the garage and do a second coat of grey primer. I've added my Tamiya masking tape all down the tops of the inspection pit, and then just cut a few pieces of strips to go over the noggins, cut them in, and then push this piece down to make sure this is all covered. And I'm going to go and give this a second coat, allow that to dry, and then we can work out how we can do the final top coats and different shades of colours for the pit. So I did a second coat of grey primer and allowed that to dry with an assistance of a hairdryer, and then I've literally gone over with a white primer and sprayed it at a distance to try and give it a speckly effect. If I can get in, hopefully you can see the speckly effect, which will give it more of a concrete colour. And then obviously then we've got to do all the weathering and stains, etc. That won't be covered in this video. Next thing we really need to do is to focus on the lights. Now obviously you've got your light glazing, but we need the outer rims, so we need to get hold of those, and then we'll come back. Right, so the framing has had a quick light coat of white primer, and then I've gone over it with a silver paint, both dried with the aid of a hairdryer to speed things up in this cold weather. To the right are your glazing panels. Now they do have backing on the front and rear. If you want to take them off and have clear glazing, it's entirely up to you, but I think this will diffuse the light quite nicely. So all I'm going to do is just glue these into position. So if you look inside your pit, you'll see your backing of your 4mm has got a little ridge, so we just add a bead of glue all the way down around, and then literally fit your glazing in, allow that to dry, and then fit your silver glazing over the top. So I'm going to go and do that next and come back and show you when that's done. So the pit glazing have been added and the framework. I've removed the Tamiya tape from this side, and as you can see we can still see the motherboard colour on the far side, and you'll most probably be able to see it on the inside as well. We need to then go inside and paint this, because obviously although we're going to be putting the chairs and rails in there, you may well still see some of this. So all I've got is a bit of black acrylic paint, and I'm going to go inside and fill it just exactly as this, let it dry, so just minimal, because obviously we're going to use our push to fit chairs, but we just want to get rid of the motherboard colour, so we need to do that all the way along that one, and obviously then take the masking tape off this side and do exactly the same on that side. So I've used some cheap black acrylic and just filled in all the gaps where the chairs go and on top, just to give it a nice matte finish. And then what I've also done is I've used some Tamiya masking tape to go on the inside, so I can get a flush line along the outside. And obviously this is now Tamiya masking tape is up against all the paint, so I wouldn't use normal masking tape. I think this will pull your paint off, so Tamiya masking tape is just the best. It's not cheap, but it's worth it if you're going to do all this. And also, as you can see, what I've also done is I've painted the whole thing in black acrylic as well. I've just protected it. I've turned it upside down everywhere. I've just added black just to give it that bit of protection, because this is a huge beast, and MDF works much better if it's got some kind of paint or primer on it to give it that protection. And obviously the side pieces I haven't glued. I've just stuck that back on to make sure it still fits when it's glued, but it fits on there nicely. I'm going to allow these to dry before I pull them off, and then really all that's left is to weather inside the pit, which won't form part of this video. We all do different weathering techniques, but that's near enough done. The only thing we've got to do is obviously then fit the rail, chairs, etc. So we've got to make those up, and that will be the next part that we do on here. So as you can see, there are some lights all lit up. So I've added the glazing, the framework, and if I come over you'll see that the lighting is both sides as well. So all I've done with that is used a meter cable LED strip, which I got from the range, which is this one. I think off the top of my head it was £1, so the best £2 I've spent. It's not quite long enough to do both sides, so you do need two. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, this side strip protects your wiring. So if I add it on the side, take it off, just excuse my office, it is a mess. As you can see, I've just taped it down and I've moved together the LED strip as close as possible and taped it, because obviously they're a certain distance apart. Put it all the way down and then just push this back into position, and that protects your LED lights. And then you've got your battery box, which you can just turn on and off, one side or both sides. Yes, it takes 6 batteries, but I think for the sake of £2 actually that worked really well. That's the way I've done it. You can do yours however you want. We still need to weather the pit, and I've still got to add the chairs to the rails, which will be the next part that I'll show you. Whether I'm not going to show you because I'm not sure how we're going to do that yet, but I've now managed to laser cut all the plastic chairs, and so I'm going to thread those on to the track and show you what that looks like. So moving on to the next part is obviously fitting the chairs and rail. So I've got my piece of Eco Track. This is Bullhead. Now there is your bag of plastic chairs. These need to be threaded on to the railing, so we need to take off all the sleepers. Now you're going to need most probably some of the sleepers, so just trim them off individually, half a dozen or so. Make sure you don't break the tags, because you might want to put them back on at the end of either side of your shed kit when you've done it. So, and obviously this is far too long. We don't want to cut it just yet because it's easier to slide the chairs on from a factory cut piece of track than it is if you did a Dremel. So we need to take all these off and thread the rail chairs. So there's all the sleepers. I've just used the Dremel and just cut up in all individual ones. We might need some of these later. There's your two rails, so we're not going to cut those yet. And these are all your chairs. Now hopefully, if I can get up to the rail chairs without it going out, you'll see that on the left hand side, before the rail, where the rail goes, it's a flat area, and to the right it's an angled area. Now the flat area needs to go on the outer side, so this side and that side of the pit, because when we come to do our pit base, our overlay will fit on top of this, and the angled part will be face the inner side of the pit, which is be the visible side. So these are all your chairs. There's most probably a few spare. Now on the pit there's 78, and then you need 24, so 12 each side, left here and right here of the pit. So we need 102 we've got to thread. This is going to be fun, isn't it? So it's 51 each side. So all I'm going to do is thread 51 on each rail, and then you've got the arduous task of moving them so they all fit within this area. So I'm going to most probably leave the rail uncut for the moment because I'm not sure how far the pit area goes at the moment. I haven't got that to hand, so I'm just going to thread 51 each side, lead 12 either end before the pit, do the pit 39 each side, and then the 12 the other end, if that all makes sense. So unfortunately this is the boring part. That was most probably boring, just cutting those sleepers up. This is going to be mind-blowingly boring, and you'll most probably hurt your fingers and thumbs by the time you've threaded 102 of these buggers on. So let's do that and then we'll come back and show you. Right, don't say you don't have any fun when you put one of these kits together. God blimey, that was tedious, but I did say it would be. Right, so we've threaded 52 chairs on either side. We've made sure we've got the flat side on the outer side on both sides. Just double check, go along every single chair, make sure you got it right. If you got it wrong, just break it off. Don't suddenly pull 25 off and put 25 back on. Just break one off. There should be 8 spare chairs in your kit. Some of these chairs will go on a lot easier than others. When they come out of the laser machine, they're extremely hot, so I have to be very careful, and the moulding dries so quickly, so some of the gaps will be easier than others to fit in, so you might end up hurting your finger and thumb pushing them on at the end. But if you find one that doesn't go on very well, just put it to one side and use another one. You've got 8 spare. So on this particular kit, so we've got 6 chairs to go in the base this is going with, so I've made sure that's the case, and I've left 6 at the other end. And then all I've literally done is put the rail on top, and I've just then slid all the chairs approximately in place to where the holes are. Doesn't have to be exact because this isn't science at the moment, we're not going to fit them in. And then obviously start at one end, push it in. This is a push to fit system, there's no glue required. If you want to add glue, you're more than welcome to, but I don't think you need it. I've designed it so you don't need it. Push them in and just work your way along, and they'll drop down, you get to the end, and then obviously then done, and then replicate that on the other side. Obviously we haven't got our base yet, so I haven't fitted this on, so I'm not going to physically add these chairs at the moment, but you can if you want to. And obviously I'm going to leave the rails uncut for the moment. I want to try and weather this pit before I do anything, because I've got to build the rest of the kit that goes with this, albeit 50% hasn't been done yet. So that is your pit and your rails, and obviously then at some stage if you want to use these chairs, cut off pieces and then just slide them back on so they fit onto your next baseboard, whatever you want to do. That's entirely up to you. But I think we'll call it a day there on this, how to build an inspection pit. I think that's given you a huge insight into how it's done. Pretty long video, but we want to make sure that we show our customers how we do it. We don't want you relying on not having any instructions. Thanks for watching, and we'll continue to do the next video, which will be the how to build the diesel depot shed which goes with this pit. Thanks for watching. Cheers folks, bye. As you can see, I have weathered my pit with a number of different washes. I've got all those different washes. They're big grimy in places, not so much in others. And you'll also see that I have my rails in place. Now these are extremely tight to fit, obviously depending on making sure how much paint you put in these, but I'll most probably add just a little piece of MDF, because the 2mm or 3mm MDF is ideal when you push these in. Try and space them and then just push them in as you go along, and then you can use this piece of MDF to push them in place, and then once you've got them in, go on the outside with the straight edges and push them right down, and they will go slot in extremely tight. Just be careful when you do this. And obviously I've left my 6 chairs that side, haven't cut it. 6 chairs this side, haven't cut it. So obviously I'm not going to cut this until I actually know the length I need. But there you go, that's lights on, rails on, pit's weathered. That is as much as I can do before this gets fitted to a base. Before we sign off for good on the inspection pit video, obviously we've just fitted the rail chairs into the pit to make sure they all fit nicely, and obviously you've got your 6 each end. Obviously what I forgot to remember is that this is going on a base plate for a shed. Still haven't decided whether this will be a separate kit yet. If it does, it will have a small outer plate, and obviously we need to fit the pit to the plate. It's got to fit within these noggins, and obviously it goes all the way around, so your rails and chairs need to come off. So literally pull them out of the holes and just put it off from one end. It will be tight because obviously you push them in. Just pull them off and it'll gradually come out. It's easy enough just to remove. Obviously, yes, you will have to respace your chairs, take them off, and then you've got your pit, and then obviously then you can put your base plate around and glue it into position over these here. Once you've done that and then you're happy with that, then you can obviously fit the rail sleepers of chairs back into the holes, and then obviously you've got your ends where you can most probably then decide to trim off your rails, because you'll know what size base you've got. But sorry about that, obviously I've totally forgot that you're going to need to put a base on. Silly me, but most probably you might have already sussed that one out. But it's not hard to redo, just means you've got to put these back in at some stage and refit. So that hopefully is the end, and obviously as you can see, that's the one this is actually a second pit I've done. I've just made some slight amendments to the first one, just to try and make it a little bit better, and we will move on now to the actual shed build and crack on with that.